Okay, so you mentioned that maybe an element of being a super elite athlete is that there's often some element of childhood adversity or trauma they've experienced in their lives. And there's definitely a movement in British schools right now for more schools to be what we would call more trauma informed. So but kind of what this means is that teachers, school leaders need to be more aware of children who may be dealing with adverse childhood experiences and kind of adapting our teaching the support to kind of help those children. But what I wanted to kind of ask you is, how does trauma affect our minds and bodies? Because this is an area that you talk about in the book, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. And look, I think the critical thing from everyone's point of view is, firstly, it helps us understand ourselves a little bit. You know, I found myself reading through this trauma stuff, and you know, I've got these one methodology, which is just a simple introductory methodology, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Index, and it's why it's so relevant for schools. And you know, there's a few flaws in the system, and it's really just a brief diagnostic tool about things that happen in people's households. But you know, it gives you a list of categories, and you have to say yes or no to them. And as a result of that, you give yourself a score. And so, did you experience any sort of physical abuse growing up, any sexual abuse, any emotional belittlement? Did you, and there's a series of 10 things. Did you live with someone with addiction? Did you live with someone who went to jail? These 10 things just give you the ability to draw a score. And you know, my own ACE score is 4 right now. Really interesting thing that we've learned about this is that, you know, an ACE score of 4 intriguingly correlates with a doubling of your chance of getting heart disease, a doubling of your chance of getting of various cancers. It's you know, high ACE score is correlated with addiction and sort of you know, people taking things to sort of meet I guess medicate them, self-medicate themselves. So like really interesting analysis. But what you discover is that in as much as those things have an impact, they don't necessarily have to have an impact. And the reason why ACE-informed education or ACE-informed policing or ACE-informed behaviours is that the more we understand these things, the more we recognise our own identity isn't determined by our experiences, but you know, it just played a part in getting us to where we are. It can have a huge impact. So there's a lovely quotation from a guy who runs the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. And he said, you know, the thing that we've learned about understanding trauma-informed education is that someone's experience does not determine what's going to happen to them. It doesn't determine their outcome. It just gives us a clearer perspective of how we need to adapt to it. And I think, you know, the reason why ACE-informed policing and ACE-informed education has been so effective is that I think it enables us to understand the anger that someone's demonstrating. You know, 85% of all adult anger is explained by people's childhood trauma. So, you know, the more that we can understand why someone is expressing these things, the more we can try to solve it. And I think, you know, it's for me, it's just such a fascinating lesson of self-discovery, but also helps us understand that, you know, these things, like I say, trauma can often be experienced as shame. It can often be expressed as anger. And understanding all of those things helps us to at least understand what's being presented in front of us, really. You know, this anger seems to have no source to it. Right. Actually, if we understood that the sources may be a deep-rooted sense of shame or a deep-rooted sense of trying to redress things. It was a really fascinating analysis of the average ACE score of prisoners in the American prison system is 6. It's like really high. You know, an ACE score of 6 correlates with a 20-year shorter life expectancy. So, you know, these things have a big, it doesn't sentence you to 20 years younger, but you know, you need to sort of understand that these things play a part. And what you discover is that most murders, for example, have normally got a deep-rooted sense of humiliation as a child. So the person who goes on to be a murderer doesn't accidentally become a murderer in most instances, but they have a deep-rooted sense of humiliation that is so locked into their psyche. They need to prove people wrong. They need to demonstrate their success. It's just such a fascinating insight, and I think for us people who don't practice in the field, it's just a really valuable tool to understand some of the things in front of us, really.
Yeah. And also when you talk about trauma and kind of adversity, you also kind of make it clear that we're not talking about trying to make life nice and kind of complete. Well, one, it's impossible to make life completely adversity free or trauma free, because life is unpredictable and messy. But actually, a piece of research that really caught my eye was plotting life satisfaction against lifetime adversity. And there's this kind of interesting inverted U curve where no adversity at all in life actually indicates kind of lower life satisfaction. A lot of trauma, even worse for life satisfaction, but it kind of peaks when actually there's like this, what you referred to as like this Goldilocks sweet spot, that actually a life with some adversity kind of seems to make us more satisfied with our lives. Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I guess it's that thing where, not being gifted a sports car for our 17th birthday maybe proved to be the making of us. Not being gifted too many good things probably seems to frame our frame of reference. It's really interesting implication from the sports people research I mentioned before, but one of the things that sports coaches have tried to think then, okay, right, we want to bring some sort of challenge to the way that people are training, learning, and developing, because it seems to produce a hardiness in them. So even if we can't sort of produce something that's extreme, which we wouldn't want to, can we try to toughen people up by sort of exposing them to some of the frictions of life? It's I guess to some extent it matches our own expectations. We see people whose lives are completely protected and insulated, and maybe they aren't able to handle the challenges of life. The research does seem to suggest there is a Goldilocks zone of not having a completely coddled existence, but having some degree of experience of life toughens us up to expect that life won't necessarily be a walk in the park.